Raider Nation. Thank you for joining us on the Only Nation podcast, brought to you by the Raider Ramble and sponsored by Betway. My name is Heidi, but you may know me as Kevlar Prom Dress or even Raider Ladybug. I'm here with T3 Raider Facts, and we're ready to talk some Raiders football together.
And Heidi, we've got a lot to talk about going into the bye week, sitting now at 1-4 on the season, so let's get to it.
Today on the show, we'll talk about the Raiders game against the Chiefs on Monday, the growing list of injuries for the team, and what the Silver and Black needs to be able to do going forward in order to be able to finish games.
Okay, Raider Nation, we would love to hear from you, so here's how you can get in touch with us. Give us a call on the Only Nation podcast voicemail line at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. You can also check us out on the web at onlynationpod.com.
Here's the latest Raider news.
After building a 17-0 lead, the Raiders began to falter and then were outscored by the Chiefs 30-12 for the rest of the game. And Las Vegas ended up losing a tough one on the road by a score of 30-29.
And I have to admit, as I was watching the game, and once they built up that 17-0 lead, I continued to remain hopeful, but I knew that Kansas City was going to mount a comeback at some point. And just like as happened against the Cardinals, the team did not play 4 full quarters. We're still looking for that. And as the defense continued to falter and unravel, the defense stopped to be as productive as it was early in the game. So these are things that have to be cleaned up and things that have to be corrected. Now, we have a fairly easy schedule going forward, but the Raiders still are going to have to show up and win games. And to do that, once again, they have to put together 4 quarters of football and be a lot more consistent.
Yeah, I saw a post last night that said there wasn't a Raiders fan in the world that thought that lead was safe. And that's true. I didn't think it was safe. I knew with Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs were going to be able to make a comeback. It was just a matter of how much of a comeback and how much the Raiders could hold on. And once again, while they did go to Josh Jacobs, they really didn't go to him as much as they could have. They didn't rely on the run when they had a 17-point lead. You have a 17-point lead, you rely on the run. I mean, Jacobs was averaging 7 yards a carry. You don't go away from that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at length. But again, you're right. When you have a guy with a hot hand, you stick with it.
Once again, Josh Jacobs led the Raider rushing attack with 154 yards on 21 carries and also scoring a touchdown. Jacobs averaged 7.3 yards per carry on the night.
And as you mentioned, 7.3 yards per carry. When you have your back doing that, and Kansas City clearly had no answer. They stopped him a couple of times, but he was breaking off large chunks of yards. He even outperformed what he did against Denver. And the Kansas City defense, in my opinion, is a little bit better than what Denver had to offer, but they had no answer for Jacobs. And you're right. When you have a hot hand like that, you need to keep feeding him the ball. He seemed to keep getting stronger as the game progressed. He did go down what looked like with an injury a little bit toward the mid part of the fourth quarter, but then he came back strong. And you're right. They could have used him coming out of the backfield on passes as well as on the run. They did that during the game, and he was effective, but I don't think they went to it nearly enough, particularly in those critical situations.
Yeah, and I know how everyone's always criticizing check down Carr, but have we seen a screen pass this year?
Only a couple, and the thing about it is they haven't even gone to Jacobs. They've gone to Brandon Bolden.
Raiders really need to start utilizing that. I can understand the fans' frustration if there are so many screen passes and that seems like that's all that's being run. But there's got to be a little bit of variety in there, a little bit of balance.
Well, and again, that gets down to the play calling. You take what the defense gives you, and the screen pass was there, and just like Josh Jacobs' runs were there. So I don't think there was a good enough scheme going on, and you can call it dink and dunk all you want, but the key for the game last night would have been, well, we say last night because we're broadcasting here on a Tuesday after the Monday game. The Raiders simply had to hang on to the ball and keep it out of Mahomes' hands. To do that, you keep it either on the ground or keep the screen passes going where you can keep the ball inbounds and keep that clock running. You have to manage the time, and you have to cut as much of it off as you can and keep Mahomes on the bench.
Yeah, you keep Mahomes off the field. That's how you beat the Chiefs. That's the only way to beat the Chiefs.
And they were beating them. And the first quarter, midway into the second, the defense was doing its job. They came out with a lot of energy, and they had really taken the crowd out of the game early.
Davante Adams had only 3 receptions during the game. Well, originally 4, but one of those was taken away after a call reversal. And he scored 2 touchdowns. He gained a total of 124 receiving yards. That's an average of 41.3 yards per reception. And he drew a couple of defensive pass interferences from the Kansas City defense as well. He had a good game.
Now, here's the thing. We brought Davante Adams in to be a playmaker and to be a game changer. And he only had 3 receptions on the game. I could go in a lot of detail there. But again, Derek brought him in. That's his guy. And Davante showed with the 3 receptions, 41.3 yards per reception, and then the DPIs from the Kansas City defense, they did not have an answer for him. Even on the one that he caught allegedly, but then they reversed it with a call reversal. And I agree with you, Heidi. He did not have control of the ball, in my opinion. So I think that call reversal was right. Even though you have to have definitive evidence, it looked like it was being a bobble there. So I'm not going to rake the referees over the coals for that one. But again, Davante needs to get the ball more than he's getting it.
I agree with you. After that first game of the season, everyone was like, come on, there are other people other than Davante, spread the ball around. Yeah, that's true. But Davante only had, I think it was 7 targets on the night. While he made good use of those targets with the receptions and with the defensive pass interference calls, he simply does need more, especially when you have Darren Waller going down after 6 snaps.
Yeah, and going back to the Charger game, I had no problem with him getting the ball as often as he did. Now, of course, I think we could have mixed it up and given Josh Jacobs the ball more in those critical situations, and Carr did not have his best game. But again, Davante is a guy that you need to feed the ball to as often as possible.
Yeah, and he showed that he is that game changer, point blank.
Absolutely.
He showed it.
And Kansas City, as we mentioned, they had no answer for him.
Yeah. Max Crosby had 2 sacks, and Denzel Perryman also picked up a sack for the Raiders. The defense played pretty well in the first half, except for the last 17 seconds. But then things started to fall apart in the second half as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce took over.
And I got to tell you, when Kansas City got the ball with 17 seconds left before the end of the first half, I started having these visions of the Dolphins game all over again. And a ridiculous face mask penalty once again, which set the Chiefs up just like it did the Dolphins for a field goal at the end. And of course, they only ended up winning by 1. There are lots of different plays that happened during the course of the game, but giving up that field goal late at the end of the first half and having the score be 20-10 where it could have been 20-7, that was a big momentum shifter for the crowd as well as for the team. I think it sent the Chiefs in with a lot of inspiration, a lot of motivation, and it really helped, I think, flip the energy for the two teams.
Oh, yeah. If I would have been a Chiefs fan, I would have gone into the half feeling pretty good about myself. I would have felt like the team was on the way to waking up and was on their way to mounting a comeback. And the Raiders defense simply had no answer for Travis Kelce. I mean, 4 touchdowns on 25 yards receptions. I mean, that was crazy.
Well, they had answers, but they were all good as far as Kansas City's concerned. I mean, once again, and I don't want to pick on this guy. I really want to like Jonathan Abram. I really want to see him do well. But he looked like a little kid running around the supermarket looking for his mom.
Yeah, and he was just like a little pest, like jumping up, trying to reach his big brother and trying to swat at him or something.
Yeah, he did have that one good play where he came in on a blitz and almost got Mahomes. But once again, in coverage, he's a liability.
He is an incredible liability in coverage. It is sad to say. Derek Carr was 19 for 30 for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions, and he was sacked twice. But what continued to plague the Raiders was having to settle for 3 Daniel Carlson field goals instead of touchdowns. On the night, the Raiders were only 5 for 12 on third down conversions and 1 of 2 on fourth down tries, including the failed conversion try at the end of the game, as they were driving for a potential game-winning field goal.
And I will say, on the 1 fourth down that they did convert, which was the big touchdown throw, I was concerned about that play call at that particular point. I wanted them to go ahead and just pick up the first down. But again, credit the play call. It was an excellent throw. Devontae had a step on his competition and gathered it in, and there you go. That was one of the first big plays of the game. But once again, we were getting field goals instead of touchdowns. If we could have gotten any one of those field goals converted into a touchdown, could have been a different ballgame.
Yeah, and, at the restaurant, all of us armchair quarterbacks were like, no way, you're not going for it. Not at this point in the game, not in that field position. Oh, what a brilliant play.
Yeah, it's easy to call it brilliant when it scores 6.
That's exactly what I would have done. But no, I mean, most of us were like, dang, that's a pretty gutsy play. It's not one that I would have called. It worked. And Josh McDaniels, for the most part, had the pedal to the metal for most of the game, which explains some of his coaching decisions. The thing that I don't get is just him abandoning Josh Jacobs. Okay, he didn't abandon him, but he didn't go to him as much as he should have.
He did. And Mack Hollins did not have any catches on the night. And we've seen what a big part of the offense he's become, particularly if you have no tight ends involved. And Jesper Horsted, he's a professional tight end. Granted, he's an NFL tight end, but he's no Darren Waller and he's no Foster Moreau. And you have to rely on your other weapons. Mack Hollins had to get at least a couple of catches in the game. And I know they threw that one to him in the end zone, which he almost came down with, but not quite. And of course, they end up getting a field goal instead. But they should have tried to get him the ball more on those shorter routes.
KT3, and I think you also had some thoughts about the NFL officiating for not only this game, but for the entire weekend.
Yeah, Heidi, let me just say this. NFL officiating has now become truly an embarrassment. The roughing the passer gift that Tom Brady and the Buccaneers received was as bad as the call that the Raiders' Derek Carr got against Kansas City. But I don't think I've ever seen a defensive holding on the interior of the line on a field goal attempt where the defender and the offensive lineman are simply locked up. This was a targeted call. It was a definite makeup call for the roughing call earlier in the game. And I would just like to point out that after that bogus roughing penalty, the Raiders, who had only been penalized 3 times up to that point, fairly deep in the first half, were then flagged 8 times versus only 2 penalties for the Chiefs for the rest of the game. That is one of the keys of the game.
I'll give you that. The Raiders really were gifted that call against Chris Jones, and that call could have made a huge impact on the game because the Chiefs would have had the ball with fairly good field position, and there's no telling what they could have done. But it was pretty obvious that that call against Malcolm Koonce was a makeup call, and the refs were playing catch up after that call. I have no problem saying that roughing the passer call for Derek Carr was a bad penalty.
Oh, absolutely.
I have no problem admitting that. That was not a penalty. That was good defense. And the Chiefs should have been given the ball at that point.
I went on Twitter even after that happened, and I was very vocal about that. I said, I don't care what team you root for. That was one of the most horrible calls I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I have no problem admitting that. I totally agree with that. But the thing is, the refs did end up deciding things towards the end of the game that they shouldn't have. And I don't have a problem with the reversal of the call for Davante Adams' catch on third and 1?
Right.
I don't have a problem with that because he was bobbling the ball and only had 1 foot in bounds. I said that that's probably what they were going to call, that they probably were going to call it back, and they did. And on the final play that the Raiders had the ball when Hunter Renfrow and Davante Adams ran into each other, that was not a defensive pass interference. So I have no problem with that no call, but I do have a problem with the Malcolm Koonce call. That one did make a difference.
Absolutely. There was no penalty on that last play. Hunter and Devontae just got their signals crossed. Somebody ran a wrong route and they ran into each other and they knocked each other down. So I think they ended up knocking both the defenders down as well, but that was all initiated by them.
Yeah, that was a no call, and that was a legit call. But the Malcolm Coons call, that one might have been. There's no telling what the Chiefs would have done with the ball had that been given to them on that roughing the passer penalty. But there's no doubt that that Malcolm Coons call really cost the Raiders.
I don't think I've ever seen that call happen before. I was going back through and trying to see if I've ever seen a defensive holding on the interior of the line on a field goal attempt. I don't think I've ever seen that call made before.
I sure haven't. Okay, so let's talk about the game. This team seems to be so close. But at least from a record standpoint, the Raiders are still struggling. What do you say, T3?
I still don't know at this point, and of course we're 5 games in, I still don't know at this point if Josh McDaniels is going to be a good head coach. It's on the fence, and I hate saying that. I trusted in the process when they came in, and I still want to wait it out. I'm not one of those who's saying fire him right away, but I'm just saying he hasn't proven to me that he's going to be a good head coach. What I'm seeing right now is the same thing that I saw when he was lit up on the Broncos sidelines to the tune of 59-14 by our good old Raiders, who we love so much. But I just don't know. The play calling is suspect at points, but doesn't seem like we're using the weapons the way we need to. I just don't know. Now, no matter how many times we talk about it, there are 2 things that this Raiders team needs to correct. On the offensive side of the ball, they need to convert touchdowns. We've talked about that since week 1. Daniel Carlson nailed 3 field goals on Monday, but if any one of those 3 becomes a touchdown instead, the results would have been different. Now, on defense, the team needs to learn how to consistently tackle, and they need to find a way to track receivers on those soft routes through the middle. Going forward, those corrections can make the difference between wins and losses, and we've been close every game. We've had the chance for every loss we've had so far this season. We've had the chance with the ball in our hands to win the game at the end, and we just haven't.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure about where Josh McDaniels stands either. I am not as mad at him today as many Raider fans are. There are a lot of Raider fans that are calling for his head right now. And I'm not at the point where I'm going to be calling for it yet. What I am disappointed in him is just him wanting to establish the run, keeping 5 running backs on the roster, saying, by his actions that the foundation of the team is going to be the run. And then abandoning it, not going to it when he needs to go to it. And that I just don't understand. The one game where they stuck with it the way they were supposed to, the Raiders won. The Raiders are close. Record-wise, they aren't. But when you look out on the field and what the Raiders are putting out as a product on the field, they are close. They really should have a much better record than they do. And it's frustrating as a fan, but it's got to be frustrating for those players.
They should at least be 3-2. Now, I thought going into this week that they would be 3-2. And again, any of those games could have gone any way at all, except for the Denver game. I think we would all agree that we had that one pretty much salted away. That was not one of those that came down to the wire. It looked kind of sketchy at first, but they did what they needed to do. But again, as Raider fans, we're used to this. We're used to being in a position where we have to dig ourselves out of a hole, and we're going to have to do that again. Now, the schedule is going to line up pretty nicely coming out of the bye week, but again, that's going to depend on a lot of things. The injury situation continues to be a concern, and of course, Waller, as you mentioned earlier, only had 6 snaps before going out with a hamstring injury. He could be missing for the Texans game. And, of course, we had the little dust-up, the little altercation involving Davante Adams after the game. He could potentially be suspended. by the time this goes to press and goes out for people to listen to, that decision may have already been made. So we'll have to see if he'll just get fined or maybe if he'll miss a game. I don't know. But if that's the case, if you're down Waller and Davante Adams, and of course if Foster Moreau's still on the shelf, you're really not looking at all the weapons that we had started off the year with.
Yeah. And I think that, I hate to say it, but if Davante Adams was still a Packer, I mean, there might be a chance that he just gets away with the fine. But he's a Raider now. And Davante is going to be suspended. He's going to be suspended a good game, that's for sure. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but
I put on Twitter, if that had been Tom Brady, the cameraman would have been arrested and fined and probably had all of his press credentials taken away.
Cameraman would have been arrested for assault. He stepped in front of Thomas Brady
and made contact with him.
I mean, yeah, he pushed him, but still, we're talking about Thomas Brady. All right, the Raiders now have a bye week before returning home to face the Houston Texans. What needs to happen during the break? Well, I say that Josh McDaniels is taught what the running game is. That's what needs to happen during the break. Josh Jacobs needs to rest up. You know, if he might have gotten nicked up a little bit against the Chiefs, he can really use this week for rest. And I would like to see them go to Zeus a little bit. Now, Zeus, he only got one carry against the Chiefs and he lost 7 yards, but he didn't have a chance, really. I mean, he was hit behind the line. I would like to see Josh Jacobs go on 2 more, and I would like to see McDaniels go to him more. But I would like to see a little bit more running back by committee. I'd just like to see more running back. Waller needs to heal up. We need to get him involved in the offense. And I think the defense is coming together. I really do. They just need to work on being consistent. Max Crosby is having a good year. We just need to make sure that Chandler Jones catches up to him a little bit. Chandler Jones did make himself visible on some plays against the Chiefs. I was glad to see that. But he needs to rest and then catch up with Max, and both of them need to assault the upcoming teams.
You're right. Chandler Jones did have a better game. Going into this game, and of course going all the way back to the beginning of the season, the 2 weak areas that everybody had circled on the Raiders roster was the offensive line and the defensive backfield. The offensive line gave up some critical plays. They gave up a couple of sacks and, of course, had a couple of penalties, which were not good. And the defensive backfield just kind of seemed to melt down at the end. They seemed to play fairly well early, but I was just scared every time that they would pass across the middle. Jayon Brown being out hurt a lot. He comes in as a thumper in that linebacking core, and not having him in really made a difference, just like Denzel Perryman being out for a couple of games hurt the defense as well. We need to add more pieces to this. And I will tell you this as well. Other than Max, I don't think I heard a single defensive lineman's name called during the course of the game. Once again, that's got to change. We've talked about the fact that the Raiders have ignored the defensive line position, not brought in either people from the key free agent position or draft. Same thing with the linebackers. But again, this is something going forward that the Raiders are going to have to address. And again, if they don't, they're going to continue to run into some of the same problems that they're running into this year. Now, as far as what's going forward, the Raiders need to flush this loss, and they need to come out with urgency against the Texans. They have a week to recover and rest up. Now, Josh Jacobs has established himself as a running force this year for the team. By the same token, Davante Adams has proven his worth on the receiving end of Derek Carr passes. It's imperative that the Raiders get off to a quick start against Houston, but they can't let up this time. The home crowd's going to be hungry, and they'll probably be a little bit angry as well. Okay, probably a lot angry. What we all need to remember is that the 2 Super Bowl teams from last year, the Rams and the Bengals, are both sitting at 2-3. That's only a game ahead of where the Raiders are. Now it's time to put together a winning streak, and it starts with one game. It starts at Allegiant Stadium against the Texans.
And I actually think that the Raiders season is not over. I know there are a lot of people saying we're in the AFC West. They're playing against the Chiefs and the Chargers. The season's over. No, it isn't. The Chiefs and the Chargers have shown that they are not all that they've been cracked up to be. Chiefs, they're good. I'll give them that. They're good. But the Raiders are not dead in the West. They still have a chance, especially with the schedule that's coming up. So Raider fans, do not feel lost. I think the Raiders can still put something together. Me, the eternal optimist, I see a victory against the Texans, and I see a changing of the page after the bye week.
And I still think they can pull out a 10-7 record.
Well, there you go.
I am hopeful.
I would say it's possible. I think, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm just going to say I hope you're right.
Well, let's hope I'm right. I'm 3 weeks in a row correct, so maybe I can stay on that track. I'm already calling a win against the Texans coming up.
Okay, we're both calling a win against the Texans. Yeah. Okay. KT3, why don't we hear your top three for the week?
T3's top three.
All right, here is this week's top three. Number one, with still plenty of time left on the clock, you have to kick the extra point and tie the score instead of trying to forge a 1-point lead. Regardless of what analytics may or may not say, the play calling decision to go for two at the end of the game was absolutely the wrong call. In every game, there are a handful of plays that can make the difference between winning and losing. Unfortunately, the Raiders are finding those plays, and they end up being on the bad side more often than not. That needs to change. Number two, one of my biggest fears going into the offseason was the health of Darren Waller. Waller got his deal, but he's still not able to find his way on the field consistently. I made the prediction that number 83 would be the most valuable player for the team this year. Right now, he's just a walking liability who is very well paid. That needs to change. And number three, according to OptaStats, the Raiders became the first team in NFL history to have a 150-yard rusher, that's Josh Jacobs, a 100-yard receiver, Devontae Adams, no turnovers, and no more than 2 punts all in the same game, and still lose. So on a down note, that is this week's top three.
Wow. And the Raiders are just setting records left and right.
Not good ones.
No, they aren't. You look at the stats, you look at what the Raiders were able to do against the Chiefs, and the Raiders really should have won. They should have.
Yes.
And I will say that as much as I was disappointed, I was still happy to see that they put up a battle. They put up a real battle, and they took it down to the last second. And that's more than a lot of people were giving them credit for. So I hate to be the one that, moral victory. But at this point in time, with the 1-4 record, I'm going to take it. I can still be ticked off. I'm still a ticked off Raider fan. But I'll take that moral victory along with my disappointment.
Right.
I understand why analytics said to go for the 2-point play. Pretty much everyone in the restaurant was saying kick the extra point. I think I was saying kick the extra point. But I would have been worried about the defense being able to hold the Chiefs and not let Travis Kelce back in the end zone for the 5th time. So I understand why you would kick the extra point against the analytics, but I also understand going with the analytics. So, my opinion on that is it's kind of up in the air, but I sure would have liked to see him kick the extra point and see what would have happened.
I was going to say, and Josh Jacobs felt bad. He thought maybe he could have extended and picked up the two-pointer at the end, and it did seem very, very close. The pile was right there at the goal line. But now, if he makes that two-pointer and the Raiders go up by one, I think that changes the entire dynamic of the play calling by the Chiefs. So even if the Raiders go up one, I still think that Kansas City is in a position to come down and win the game.
Yeah. And I don't think Josh Jacobs needs to take that pressure on him. I mean, he did his best. He had the game of his life.
He carried the game.
And Darren Waller, I know hamstrings can be a little, temperamental and everything, but get out on the field. I'm getting tired of his injuries.
Yeah, I mean, he was making all kinds of plays in the tight end camps and everything. And of course, we got to training camp. He was not in play, and then all of a sudden the season starts, and where is he? So again, it's very worrisome to me that he's gotten his big coin, and yet we're not seeing him on the field. I hope that the hamstring injury is not serious, but we just got to see him on the field.
Yeah. And I'm still of the opinion that his prior representation encouraged him to be very cautious with that injury that he had during training camp. But it's time, let's get yourself healed. Let's get yourself healed and let's get you out on the field. Okay, Darren? You can do it. I know you can.
And I'm not angry with him. I'm not blaming him. I'm just telling everybody that we're a different team without him on the field.
No, I'm not angry. I'm not blaming him. I'm just an angry, ticked off Raider fan because we're losing, and we've been losing for the last 20 years. That's just, that's just my general disposition about it.
That's true. We're all in that same boat. And it's sticking on water.
Exactly. But here I am with the bucket bailing it out.
I'm right there with you.
All right. Give us a call at 904-701-8667. Leave a voicemail or text message at that number, or send in a message via social media, and we'll share your thoughts. And I'm going to try to get Raider Roots up this week. If not, we'll get it up next week. Where we stand with it.
All right, so we're just going to go ahead and plow through the 2006 season. It is a low point from a wins and losses standpoint, about as low as you can get. But we all get to celebrate the induction of John Madden into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So that makes 2006 a really good year.
That's definitely a good year. And I haven't even had a chance to listen to it yet, so I'm looking forward to that part. I'm not looking forward to the rest of it, but I'm looking forward to that part.
If we'd have had a quarterback that year, it would have been a different story for the whole season. We have pretty good defense, actually, and I just hate that Art Shell became the sacrificial lamb, and Al Davis, heck of a way of saying, hey, I apologize for letting you go early here. Take the team for 2006, which didn't have a chance coming out of the gates, even though they finished 4-0 in the preseason.
Yeah, and who was that quarterback that was drafted like a year earlier? Aaron something Rodgers?
Yeah, we missed him by one pick. Actually, he was on the board when we picked.
What might have been.
What might have been. Imagine that 2005 season if we'd have had Aaron Rodgers throwing and Randy Moss catching.
Oh, boy. Team could have had a different destiny.
Absolutely.
We will never know.
We will never know.
All right, T3, let us find out what our quiz is for this week. What do we or do we don't know?
All right, now, Heidi, you are on a win streak here, so let's see if we can keep this thing going. I think you may get this one right. It's time for another edition of Did You Know? In this segment, I will ask Heidi and all of our listening audience a Raiders-related question with a list of answers to choose from. It's multiple choice, so just give it your best guess. Here is this week's question. The Raiders have won 16 Western Division titles, which includes both the AFC and the old AFL. Which Raiders quarterback led the team to the most consecutive division titles? Was it A, Rich Gannon, B, Kenny Stabler, or C, Daryle Lamonica? Heidi, what's your guess?
Oh, boy. That could be any of them. Rich Gannon had a few. Monica. I'm going to go with B, Kenny Stabler.
You are absolutely correct. They gave you the hint. The number was 5. So 1972, 73, 74, 75, and of course 76, which was the year that they won it all. They won division titles those 5 consecutive years. Daryle Lamonica won 4 in a row, and Rich Gannon won 3 in a row. But the correct answer with 5 consecutive division titles is the Snake, Kenny Stabler.
And I did not look that one up. I didn't even know what the question was.
You kept that win streak going.
All right. I don't even know how many I'm up to now. I'm doing good.
There you go. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Raider fans, it's time for the most important segment of the show. It is now time for Heidi's Heroes.
Josh Jacobs grew up in a broken home. When he went to live with his father before he had gained full custody of Josh and his siblings, he started to see how tough of a position he was in. While he was in elementary school, Josh and his father would sleep in their Suburban or move from motel to motel looking for the best weekly rates. Soon, Josh's siblings would join them, and Josh's father did his best to keep them all together, even though it meant staying in rough parts of town. Jacobs wasn't properly recruited for college, and he ended up putting his own highlight plays online and put them on Twitter, which started the recruitment ball rolling and got him into Alabama. The day he signed with Alabama was the day his son was born. Good old little Braxton. Braxton's 6 years old now. Josh had the opportunity to show his son a very different life, and he's been able to do that through his career in the NFL. When Josh first got to Alabama, he would often choose to sleep on the floor of his dorm room because that's where he was used to sleeping. That's where he was most comfortable. Well, he definitely has a different life now. Jacobs has had 2 career weeks in the past 2 weeks. Against the Broncos, he ran for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. And this week against the Chiefs, he ran for 154 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, while the Raiders didn't prevail over the Chiefs, even though they should have, Josh Jacobs just had such an incredible stretch. I felt he needed to be our hero. Not only has he overcome difficult life circumstances to shine, he's shining on the field as well. Josh Jacobs, you are Heidi's hero this week.
And at some point I was hoping that you would bring him in as a hero because he embodies what it means to be a success story. From all the bad things he experienced growing up, even though his family stayed together, they didn't have the best situations. He endured it and went through it, and he's able to bring his family and include them along with him. Now, we all agree with the fact that he should not have had his 5th-year option picked up, but that had nothing to do with him as a young man. It has nothing to do with him as an athlete. That has simply everything to do with the fact that the running back position is not valued nearly as much as it is. Now, having said that, I hope that Josh Jacobs continues to excel the way he is currently and that he can end up making a good payday and staying with the Raiders next year. If he doesn't, I wish him well wherever he goes, but regardless of the situation, he truly is a hero.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to see him stay as a Raider, and I would love to see him get a nice, pretty payday. It's just that running backs don't get that much in the NFL anymore. So hopefully he'll be able to stay a Raider. Hopefully he'll get a nice payday. And he's certainly shown so far this season that he's earned it. So keep it up, Josh. We're rooting for you. We love to see the way you've been playing. And you're definitely my hero this week. The way you've been playing the last 2 weeks, you've certainly earned it. And that about does it for this week on the Only Nation podcast. If you'd like to help support the show, you can send in a donation at paypal.me/onlynationpod. You can find me, Heidi Stabbert, on social media as at Kevlar Prom Dress on Twitter and Instagram, or Heidi Stabbert on Facebook. You can also find me on YouTube on Captain Jack Rackham's channel every other Tuesday night. I join the DC wench Peggy Holmes and Andrea Trask on Silver and Black Ladies Night.
And I did want to mention real quickly, since we're going to be on a bye week, we will not be broadcasting next week, but then we will come back as a follow-up once the Raiders and Texans game is over, and we'll be with you every week for the rest of the season going forward. So having said that, Raider Nation, we want you with us every step of the way during the regular season. Here's what we'd like you to do. Send us your name and address so we can send you some free Raiders swag and podcast stickers. Call us and tell us what you want to know. Throw us an interesting nugget that we could use on one of our upcoming episodes and become a part of what we're doing here. Remember, this is the only nation, and we want you to be a part of it. So call us 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. Call us now and join the Only Nation podcast family. There are 2 easy ways to find me on social media. You can send me a tweet at T3_sports703, as several of you do, or you can hit me up on Facebook at Tom, T-H-O-M, Jones. I want to also thank all of you for your continued support of the Raider Roots Project, which hopefully is going to be converted into a book project over the coming year. I'm busy doing research on a specific segment of Raiders history, which these next few episodes will be a part of. So stay tuned and please give me your feedback.
That sounds really cool, T3. Congratulations.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
All right. And everyone coming up after the bye week, we have an exciting contest to announce. So listen in on the 26th of October. We will be announcing a new contest. We'll be announcing a contest on the 26th, and then we'll be announcing a winner the next week. So listen up and get your clicking fingers ready to enter. As always, we look forward to hearing from you, everyone. Until next time, go Raiders.
And please let your friends in on the secret. We're not just a nation. We are the only nation. And we'll be back after the bye week. Until then, take care.
Raiders.